Big Thanksgiving week edition. It's so funny. Like, people in politics are just people in politics, right? I like to put out content on Thanksgiving. I don't know if they get tired of their families, they're just type A, they're bored. But I'm telling you, this will be one of our best watched shows every year because folks in politics don't take time off. And because of that, I want to bring in Guy. You're going to recognize him from print, but honestly, he's doing radio, which I think is going to be stellar. He could do TV if he wanted to. I want to bring in directly from his kitchen table, right in the heart of crazy in this state in St. Charles County, John Combest of the legendary johncombest.com. Thank you so much for making the time on this holiday week.
Scott, it's great to be with you in Kelton today.
So let's jump right in. I want to start off with, if you don't know who John Combest is, what the hell? Number two, if you've ever, sometimes folks will ask me, I'll see him somewhere. I was at the Mizzou game, and I do some Wake Up Mid-Missouri about once a week or so. And there's like, well, how do you get ready? How do you know what to talk about? And I'm like, it's the same way I know what to talk about on this show, the same way I know what to talk about on my television show, the same way I know what to talk about on a radio show. I go to johncombest.com. It's JOHNCOMBEST. That's how I prepare. I was talking to Stephanie Bell yesterday afternoon, and I was telling you, she called me if she saw you were going to be on. And I was like, that's how I prepare. You want to know what we're going to talk about? I scroll through the headlines, and it is a site that this guy right here, Mark Richardson, if you could see, the guy that got me into politics, told me about your site more than 20 years ago now. And it's the site I read every day. It's my top bookmark. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. I appreciate everybody that's ever spread the word over the last 22 years.
Gosh, we're old.
We sure are.
All right. So first of all, I want to go through how you put this together. So I popped on Tuesday. It's just John's name. I love the simplicity of it. I hope he never changes it. He did add a wrinkle that Steph and I both said add to our daily chores. We have to click on the date now to get all the headlines.
Yes.
And that is exactly how lazy I am. That is a great way to sum it up.
It's a filter, Scott. You know, it really filters out the most lazy readers.
Maybe not the most lazy. Gosh, that's a great point. So walk me through here. I'm looking at you. You run down the Eagle, which is also KWOS from here in Jeff City and Columbia. You had Alford on. How do you pick what you're going to put on the site?
In general, at the top of the website, I try to start with national issues. So if there's anything, for example, Mark Alford today is talking about the budget, talking about the J6 tapes. In general, I'm going to lead with official government news of our congressional representatives and our senators. From there, I'll go into national campaigns. So, for example, a U.S. Senate race, anything else on the federal level. Once in a while, when the federal government chooses to meddle in Missouri issues, whether it's EPA or others, or if a federal official is visiting Missouri, I'll link to one of those stories there. Then I'll head straight into statewide campaigns as we go down the list. So, you know, from governor to the statewide races to state Senate races. Then I go into the more day-to-day aspects of Missouri government. So anything, anything involving the budget is going to be at the top. Schools, usually a little bit further down the list, I'll go into utility issues, pocketbook issues. And then beneath that, I'll usually go into opinion pieces. Mm-hmm. So in the olden days, in the early 2000s, that was usually just editorials and newspaper columnists. Today, I'll usually put stuff there if it comes from, say, a progressive blog or from a reporter who's doing a little bit more advocacy journalism. I'll do them a favor. I'll include their name.
Introduce me to the ones that aren't.
Yeah, well, and you know what? Some of these progressive content creators deserve to have their name exposed to a broader audience, and I put them in the commentary section, which is where they belong.
It's so interesting, John. I've considered you a personal friend and have for a long time. It's so interesting. How do you take these headlines? My whole time I've ever known you. I remember Chris Koster, who is a watcher of this show and a avid JohnCombest.com reader. To me, it was impressive. This is when he had first became Attorney General. He was upset because you would take a headline and tweak it, and really not once involving him. As a John Combest aficionado and fan, I always thought you were quite kind to Chris Koster with your headline, with your site. But I do notice you put an opinion. You'll take a headline and you'll kind of break it out. Now, candidly, I've always been a Republican. I own that. I'm not maybe as angry as some of the other Republicans, but I like your sense of humor and mine really, I mean, are on, I've always been on the same page. And your sense of politics and mine are on the same page. Even if I don't agree with your headline change, I think it's clever or interesting, or makes me think. How do you go about tweaking them? Because I remember he's like, well, did you see Combest's headline? Yeah, I thought he very inaccurately depicted that story. And I was like, I thought it was pretty great. I thought it was pretty spot on. And it was like a 10-minute conversation because he wasn't gonna like be done with this until I agreed with him, which I just,
Right.
being a white trash hillbilly, was not gonna do. So how do you take and decide how you're gonna tweak one, copy it? How's that go through your brain?
Well, before that, first of all, I'd like to counter Chris by pointing out that he once told me that his mom was a huge fan. And if Chris's fan, if his mom loves the headlines, then I don't know what Chris has to complain about. In general, what I find is what I try to do is I try to look through a story and see about the golden nuggets that are missed by the reporter. And quite often there's going to be a nugget a little bit further down in the story that might be buried in the story. That's actually the interesting part. So if you have 2 or 3 stories and they're covered by the Star and the Post-Dispatch and the Missouri Independent, they're pretty much going to be writing the same headline. It's going to come from a progressive point of view. But some of those reporters are pretty good and will include a nugget in that story that the other ones miss. So I try to pull out what you would miss if you were just scanning the headlines on the STL Today website and you didn't read the story. What's an interesting piece in there that I can call out in the headline?
So let's talk about media for a second. You're one of the better media observers than I know. I see the Independent, right?
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't have a problem with the Independent. My take on the Independent is, look, I don't think that Rudy Keller is going to write something factually inaccurate,
Right.
nor is Jason Hancock.
Right.
I think that as far as a journalist goes, it's so funny to me. They hand out Pulitzer Prizes, and then they talk about how yellow journalism's awful. And I'm like, wait a minute. He was Joseph Pulitzer, German American, Republican state legislator from St. Louis, and was one of the founders of yellow journalism. But he did leave some money to some liberals in Columbia to give out an award. I find it interesting. The golden days of newspapers were when they were the least corporate, the least like they are now. I see no problem with the Independent taking money from liberal groups and coming up with a form of news that is more left leaning for sure, and it touches on the liberal social issues that, look, nobody in this state's going to be convinced, I don't think, or no large amount of people, but I see nothing wrong with what they're doing. I do think it is just the golden piece of hypocrisy for the other papers to say, oh no, we don't do the advocacy. We're above all that. We don't take money for writing content, when you'll copy and paste content paid for by liberal groups. The Independent is not the ones that are doing anything wrong. I mean, did they put a good spin on? Oh, sure. But as far as anything wrong, I don't see it. I think it's a fine thing to have. I think the Republicans, if you're that pin up about it, get your own fired up, right?
Absolutely. And so, I mean, I think there's a couple elements there. The first is, just because information is coming from a progressive news source doesn't mean it's inaccurate.
Exactly. Because I've never seen them be specifically just lying or inaccurate. I don't think that's what they do.
You're exactly right. And when you look back at, so the last column I wrote for you, Scott, in the Missouri Times, which was back in August, and I mentioned, well, thank you for that. I mentioned the fact I use Rudy Keller as a great example. If I'm reading a story on the Missouri budget, I'm going to read Rudy's story first. And just because he's generally coming from a progressive point of view doesn't mean that the facts are inaccurate.
Absolutely.
And I think what we have to accept, whether we like it or not, the traditional journalism has become content creation. And so,
wasn't it always?
It probably was, but I think
Let me ask you this, John. Yeah. On television, I went to this media conference once, and normally that's just an excuse for me to go somewhere warm and drink. But I went to one. I actually went to this class because I'd met a guy I liked, and we had seen him at the bar last night. So we're visiting, and this person says all of media changed in 10, something like that. And it went, and the Jersey Shore broke things because that was the time your Nielsen box went from, you would fill out a form of what you watched. So you lied and said you watched 60 Minutes and you watch PBS and you're very intelligent, but you actually watched the Jersey Shore.
Yep.
And what broke media was on the box. You were right. They put the box on there, but they didn't tell you what it was about. So a third of the Nielsen homes still had their little thing they were filling out. And while they're saying they watched PBS Frontline, they're watching Jersey Shore. And they realize what liars we all are and what we like to think of ourselves. And it changed. And with newspapers, the internet broke newspapers because before what you thought people read was up to one editor, maybe two.
Right.
Now it's up to the internet and clicks. And I think it fundamentally broke things and it set us on the course where we are today.
Yeah. And, again, it's very easy. Those of us that are predisposed to blame the media for this, that's why you obviously have the content creation themes that you have. Why is the top click story on STL Today every year? It's not some deep piece about the budget or about foreign affairs. People want to click and see what their local school administrator
or it's
earning.
The Cardinals. Let's be real.
Or it's the Cardinals, right?
I am a subscriber to STL Today. I enjoy. They have a lot of reporter turnover, but I enjoy their reporting. I know what it is.
Yep.
And I have no problem with it. But I love their Cardinals coverage, and I'd pay if they raise the subscription and just for the Cardinal coverage, I'd probably pay more. I'm glad to the other stuff in, but I could probably do without the rest. I can't do without Cardinals coverage.
Well, my analogy for this is that one of my favorite things to do during the baseball season is if the Cardinals are playing, let's say the Phillies, I want to go and I want to read the recap of the game from the Philadelphia newspaper. So I want to read the opposition's view of what a jerk Ali is and what a jerk the Cardinals are. I feel the same way when I
bet you the opposition's a very big fan of Ali and want him to stay
I
just
bet they
where
are
he's at
too.
as
I
long
bet
as
they
he
are
can.
too. And, they're probably cheering the signing of Lance Lynn too. And, I saw somebody comment that we might get Trevor Rosenthal back, who knows?
I love the last tour, the farewell tours, but I'm over them now. I like to win games.
Yeah.
Well, we'd be here a long time.
We would be.
The future of media, though, I think you're right. I think the future of media, I think innovation follows money. Where there's profit to be made, innovation happens. And I watch cable news. I watch a lot of CNN. I like to see what other people are thinking. I know what I think. I don't really need.
Yep.
I like it challenged. And so I think what we're seeing is a full circle where print news is concerned. It's going to lag behind the more profitable television media. But I think you're going to see Republicans come up with their own what media matters type stuff.
Yep.
And you're going to see it'll be a thing paid for by the now. What's so funny is that the establishment media is going to somehow say that's bad, right?
Of course,
now the independent can take SEIU's money, and that's fine. But there's others, but that's just hypocrisy. If you need to not be hypocrisy, do something else with your free time. But I think that's where you'll be, and I think you'll see different and the television folks are probably going to own all the newspapers because they'll have the capital to buy them and put their brand on it.
Yep.
And they're going to take whatever and they're going to go with it because if that's what makes money. Because in TV, it's about what makes money. They're not as, let me tell you about the good old days. It's not like Phil Brooks telling you how term limits are bad 80,000 times. Nobody's going to care.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the interesting turnover. And so people get up in arms at the independent. Yes. Is it a little disingenuous? Some of the statements, yes.
For sure.
To say they disclose all their donors. I think that's maybe not factually real. But I do think that they are what they are. I also think that no one's fooled by that. And if you are, well, do better. Do some research.
And, you brought up a great point earlier, Scott, which is in general, if Republicans to be more accurate, if conservatives and libertarians don't like it, build your own network.
Yeah.
Scott, you've built a vertically integrated operation over there. You've mentioned in previous live streams about the Missouri News Horizon. There have been a lot of stops and starts. You're one of the few that's been consistent with it. I'm an example of somebody that started his own thing just because there wasn't anything like it before. So in general, we have to support other conservative and libertarian news outlets as well. And I wrote about that in my last column.
So let me take a break here. There's something cool you're doing.
Right.
You're doing some radio.
That's
now,
right.
Tell me how that happened, and where can folks listen to you do radio? Because I'm in.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you actually how this started, and the Missouri Times is to thank for this. 2 years ago, I wrote a series of columns that I called 20 for 20. It was after doing the website for 20 years. I gave 20 things that I had learned, and I had given a shout out to a guy named Brad Hildebrand, who is a St. Louis Radio Hall of Famer. It's a famous name in the St. Louis area. Because of that Missouri Times column, Brad and I got connected. We got to talk. We've worked on a couple things over the last few years. Brad and I are starting to do our own radio show. It's Drive Time. It's in Freedom Love in Franklin County. I think that phrase is either patented by Scott Faughn or Tim Brinker. I'm not sure who.
I gotta give Brinker the credit for it.
Okay,
And even if he didn't deserve it, he would take it anyway. So
yeah, for sure. And so you can find it at 104.5 FM in Franklin County. And I got to tell you, Brad and I were not going to talk about this until next week. We weren't going to do anything to publicize it. Next week, if you go on Monday to my website, you'll be able to find a few clips. You can listen to some of the highlights of the show. We weren't going to talk about it until next week, but Scott, when you invited me to be on, I thought it'd be the perfect time to jump the gun.
Okay, Kelton, we got to put in the description of this. Go to Combest Monday, not this week, but Monday, and you can start hearing clips from the show. I love it. Also, I got to say, right here on the shelf behind me, behind my Jennifer Bukowski mug, is Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering in Your Building After Online Attacks by John Combest. You can get that on Amazon. I think I have 3 or 4. If we ever get you over here, I'm going to wear you out signing some of these.
Oh, absolutely. And I would point out to folks that it's a perfect gift. We're approaching the holiday season. If you're a statewide candidate and you notice that your staffers are getting into a few arguments online, or if you're a staffer and you notice that your candidates are getting into a lot of fights online, it's a great way for candidates and staff to put a lot of these attacks into perspective.
I think there's an arc to this, right? If you're in the House, non-leadership, I think online fights or whatever, who cares anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into House leadership or you're a senator, I think you have to pull that in because people expect you to kind of be more serious. There's a level at which you're trying to build some steam in your balloon to get off the ground. And I think some of this stuff's either neutral, fine, or even helpful sometimes. I think there's a part in your career when you want to start being taken seriously, you got to rein that kind of bullshit in.
Yep, and you have to decide where you're going to put your energy, and you have to stop seeking the approval of people that really don't matter,
or just seeking the attention. I think it's more. Yep. I think I watch a lot, especially Republicans will poke folks just to get attention. Like it's one to me that the line is, and part of this I derived from your book and so on. You post something that's your opinion. Okay, fine. Some people can like it, they cannot. Whatever. I like if it's Chris Kelly. Like I'll respond to Chris Kelly because I know Chris and I like Chris.
Yep.
But like, I'm not going to respond to like Dork Fan 74.
Yes. 42069.
Yeah. I'm not going to, I just don't care. And I also don't have any, to me, have some balls, be a man, put your name behind it, or I probably don't care. And so that to me is the line when you're responding to anonymous accounts. I'm like, ooh, you need some attention, bud. You needed to be hugged more as a child. Yikes.
Yeah. And we lived through that with the Greitens trolls, which were omnipresent. And
people bitch to me about trolls. I'm like, you don't even know.
Yeah,
you have no idea.
That was the apex, I believe, at that point. So thanks for the shout out for the book, and you gave me a chance to talk about that the last time I was on too, and I appreciate it. It's really helping people.
All right, so let's talk here before we get into the next. Well, I want to talk about the tip sheet, but first, my buddy Chad, I love this from Warsaw. Look at this. You got the bronze there, copper. You got the lid. This is everything a Hun would want to drink out of. Thank you so much, Chad. We'll pull from this stein of knowledge. Then the folks at United Fiber, they're doing broadband right. That's how you actually, if you want to see where that money goes and see the blueprint for how to do it right, go up to Savannah. The good folks at United Fiber, they know how to do it. They're setting forth the path. If you're a co-op or you're a group that want to see how to do this, look at United Fiber. That's how you do this and make it so good. The folks in the city want you to come in and run lines in the city. Also, John, if you were coming over to stay the night in Jeff City, as you've been known to do once or twice, where would you stay? What's the only place you'd stay?
Here's where I wouldn't stay. I wouldn't go to a broke down, decrepit hotel because, as Scott has pointed out, it's time to leave for the evening. You're saying goodbye to your friends. When you take the hotel key out of your pocket, out of your wallet, what kind of message do you want to send? I'm not staying and we've all stayed at the broken down conference hotel and we love it. And the smell of slight mildew gives us nostalgia.
Slight mildew and poor decisions.
Yeah, we've all been there. And however, I would stay at the Courtyard by Marriott, and it is the official sponsor of the Midweek Update.
Absolutely. It's the one place to stay. Also, Kelton, the illegal sports book. I got to look here. The illegal sports book. Who was right? So I got to go watch the fourth quarter from the field with my daughter.
Nice.
Terrific time. I mean, what a great back and forth game. I loved it. I will say that everybody last week's, I'll take Mizzou. I'll give the points. I was like, I think Mizzou can win, but I'm not giving the points. I was the bad guy. And Kelton, the $10 you owe me, I'll take it.
Hey, Kelton,
have
I
my
think
wallet.
this would be a good time, Scott, if you want to talk about. I certainly have a prediction for the game. What's the line on the game, Kelton?
So that's what I was just pulling up. Here's a red flag. We were up 11. The line was 11.5 home against Florida. The line in Arkansas is 7.5. Now we're on the road, rivalry game, which that rivalry, I think people forget it a little bit in Columbia because you're 5 hours away. But for Arkansas folks, Springfield Branson DMA is right there on it. It has become a great rivalry, especially for that Springfield Joplin area. I've been impressed by the amount of attention and buzzing. It gets more buzz in Fayetteville, honestly, than it does Columbia, which is it doesn't really make sense because they were in the SEC first and all those things. But I do think because of the population and the business community of Northwest Arkansas and the connection it has to the Springfield, Joplin, Branson area, it's got some heat. But it's an afternoon game, so it'll be the fourth quarter will be played totally in dark under the lights. It's their senior day. Arkansas has been playing better, and I think Mizzou spooked some folks. I mean, if you're up 11.5 to Florida at home, I would think you should be able to commensurate amount on the road against a bad Arkansas, a 4-7 Arkansas team. But the line is 7.5. Kelton, I guess I know what you're going to do. You're going to make me look like the asshole again.
I think they can win by 8. I think that's possible.
Of course you do. Kelton the homer. Ever since he put the sock hat on, John, he's been acting like a techie, and he's just a big kiss ass.
Yeah.
All right, John, who you got? 7.5 on the road at Woo Pig Suey.
I'm taking Arkansas and the points all day long.
Okay.
That hurts.
I tell you, God, this is a good line. I thought the Florida line was silly. I thought that I always thought because Florida is playing Florida State this week, and Florida State is a tremendous team. And I think Florida State had it in their head they couldn't beat them. I think they had it in their head they could beat Columbia because we don't have the prestige of some other teams. And I think they thought they could come in and knock us off. I think Florida knew they were playing for their bowl eligibility last week. Arkansas, this is their last game of the year. This is all they have to play for. It is a family Thanksgiving weekend rivalry game. This is going to set the tone for the offseason for them. I'm going to take Mizzou, but I think we break them. I think the feeling that team had leaving the field Saturday night, I don't think it is I don't think it's one of those games where you have a letdown game next week because those trap games, usually you have a letdown the next week because you're playing again. This is all the football Mizzou has for a month. Their chances, like this is it. Maybe they still hang the Citrus Bowl, but this is like Cotton Bowl or Who Gives a Shit Bowl. So I tend to think, and you got Drigwitz, a very ambitious man. I'm going to take Mizzou, and I'm going to give you the points.
All right. That sounds like a great
illegal
deal.
Sports, but again, if any government authorities are listening, this is Kelton's idea totally.
Actually, I think Combest had something to say about that.
Yeah. So Scott, consider this my official application to be Kelton's understudy, or if he actually gets shot down, by the feds or God forbid the Missouri Gaming Association. I think they're cool with any kind of wagering though, because I've been to some gas stations and I think it's cool we can kind of do whatever we want. But, I told Kelton that I'd be happy to be an understudy. I have a little bit of experience running a sports book. Kelton has a graphic here that we pulled out of the John Combest archives that he can show.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Now,
you did basketball?
Folks at home might not be able to see this on the screen.
Is that Shaq and Jordan?
Yeah, this is 1995. So folks that are watching live might not be able to see this, but
how do you do basketball?
Well, I'll tell you. Well, first of all, I want to give a little bit of background here. Regular readers of the Missouri Times know that I'm quite proud of attending the crown jewel of the Missouri public education system, which is the Hazelwood School District. And the crown jewel of the Hazelwood School District is Hazelwood East, which, by the way, I don't know if you know this, Scott, also produced Wesley Bell. So,
what a
combination.
Can he win that?
Yes. Yes. I didn't think Steve Roberts could, but I think Wesley can.
Well, there's a lot of motivated donors, I think, that could help.
Yeah, I
Wesley
think it's
help.
way different because of what's happened in Israel.
I'm so impressed that you actually not only had this in '95, but you could like do basket. Is that 3.5 points?
Yeah, so the basketball, when you're running a little bit of vig on basketball, and I think the statute of limitations has run out on this. So I would run a pool in math class. I would run one in English class. I had most of my classes covered here. But what's up on the screen now is the 1995 basketball season. And ideally, if you're running a sports book, which I hear is happening in Jefferson City, you're going to get multiple people on each side of the bet. So you might get the Knicks. You might give somebody the Knicks in points, and you might give up the Pacers and take a few points. And ideally, you're managing your downside there. So I consider this my formal application to be Kelton's understudy. And basketball isn't all that different when you think about the point spread from football.
Well, but you have garbage time in basketball can
That's
get
exactly right.
That's
exactly
a little
right.
tougher than even football, I think.
Well, yeah, but you also have garbage time in football as well.
Yeah.
And so, the one thing that I learned from reading about sports gambling, and it applies to the Mizzou Arkansas game, is when you're surprised by the line, like I would think that the line would be Mizzou plus or Mizzou minus 11, right? When you're surprised by the line, you usually go in favor of the sports book. And if Vegas says that, if sports books makers say that Arkansas should only get 7.5, they probably know something.
Okay. So in order to keep the time you've been very generous to give us.
Yeah.
We got another picture here?
Oh, yeah. Let's run that up.
Oh, the Birdman, Coco Beware. I love it.
Now you can tell that photo is dated because I was without a beard. And Scott and I both look like young men. And, here's the thing. Coco came up to us and said, I've always wanted to meet people involved in Missouri politics. Do you guys have time to take a picture? And we were having a grand old time, and we were, in the middle of our own conversation.
And he somehow stole Austin Peterson's shirt.
He did, absolutely. Austin is still looking for it. And he stole my hamburgers right in front of him, too. But, hey, what could he say?
I mean, hard times for the Birdman.
Yeah.
I still remember the story about how he thought the Undertaker took liberties with him. And it's like, Coco, you're not at the level of, come on, man. You don't.
Not even when it was Mean Mark Callis.
No, yeah. There's a pecking order here, and you're the Birdman on the pecking order.
So those are all the surprises we have for you, Scott. We got the booking sheet, and we got Hall of Famer Coco Beware.
I got a surprise for you. Kelton, go that picture. This is a picture a friend of mine, Rob DeRocker, sent to me. This is the first Habitat for Humanity summer project in New York City that President Carter and his wife Rosalind was with. That is her, who just passed away this week.
Yep.
But what a great life the guy led. I mean, what that guy embodied. Take his politics out of it, just as a person. God, that's missing today. It's gone. There's none of it. All right, so I do the tip sheet. They'll be coming out this week. I like to put my tip sheet out at Thanksgiving because political people don't put their phone down. I'll bet you see it with your clicks.
Yeah,
it doesn't. It's almost more because they're sitting there
and they want to avoid the in-laws. They want to avoid the cousins, so they're just scrolling their phone,
sucking on their phone. And so when I do this, I put the tip sheet together. I always call about 10, 12 people around the state and ask about, especially state senate races. Let's just rock it from the top. What I always do is I do like a toss up, lean and likely, and then safe. Governor's primary. What do you see there?
I've never bought into the notion that Jay Ashcroft was the front runner. And I think a lot of people from the beginning, from name ID, for some reason thought that Jay was the front runner.
Name ID. But how do you assuage a front runner when they lead in all the polls and they have the name ID off the charts? I mean, that to me are two big things that make a front runner a front runner.
Yeah, but also to me, if you look at Mike Kehoe as the incumbent, so he's lieutenant governor. Scott, you've said on the show before, if you're a member of an association that hasn't endorsed Mike Kehoe, that association probably isn't much of an association.
But do you give a damn?
If you're a member of the group, you do. And if you're running against a guy that's amassed a huge amount of money, like Kehoe will have, I think Bill Eigel would tell you that Kehoe is the front runner because, Eigel likes to run. He wants to run as the underdog candidate in this. And I think the challenge for Jay is, somebody who you and I know, Scott, Eric Bischoff always said, if you're running against a juggernaut, you either have to be better than or less than or different than. Now, I don't think anybody thinks that Jay Ashcroft is a better politician than Mike Kehoe. I don't think Jay Ashcroft thinks he's a better politician than Mike Kehoe. And I don't see that much difference. If you're a normal guy or gal looking at candidates, I don't see a whole lot of difference between Kehoe and Ashcroft. So if you're not going to be better than Kehoe, and how are you going to be different than him? Bill Eigels made a great case of why he's way different than Mike Kehoe, but I haven't seen that from Jay. So if you're not better than and you're not radically
today,
different than,
Thanksgiving, I don't know how you don't. I could see your point about how this unfolds, but today, how's Jay Ashcroft not the front runner?
if the vote were held today, maybe Jay wins. But also look at how much money has Jay been able to raise. How much money will Kehoe be able to raise?
That is the part about Ashcroft. Ashcroft should be able to raise more money than he's raised.
Right.
There's just no way around that. Even if you're in the Ashcroft campaign, there's money out there you haven't brought in. Well,
Yeah.
give me this. So right now, who give me where this race ends. Give me where you at. Toss up, likely, lean. Where you at?
I think it leans Kehoe.
Okay, I totally see that, 100%. I think that's where it could end up. That's why they get. But there's some interesting twists and turns going to come in there.
Yeah.
Lieutenant governor's race, you've got Dean Plocker, who I think may have got his staff situation situated. What a great break for Plocker that all the editorial boards came out against him. And that was,
absolutely.
You definitely, if you're Chris Sander and you're wanting a change, the last thing you want the cavalry to come in is carrying a red flag from the Red Star or the Independent or whatever. I mean, that's like, oh God, no, we don't need the help. I thought that was a beautiful blessing for Dean Plocker.
And here's what I think. And here's a specific recommendation for Dean. And if I was his consultant, and I'm not, and if I was his best friend, and I'm not, here's what I would tell him. First of all, he's got to fire his treasurer. And even though his treasurer is his wife, you can't have somebody in that position.
You have more balls than I do.
That's your spouse. So she's got to go, and he can do it in a loving way. Secondly, he follows up by.
That's what he needs the advice on, is a loving way.
Well, we could talk about that offline. But secondly, he's got to go with. He's gonna have to pay up. He should get an accounting agency, pay up for a good Missouri-based accountant to look over his books. And third, here's the most controversial recommendation I have. When pre-filing starts, Dean needs to suggest that the Missouri House website have what's called the public lookup of conference hotel expense reports. The acronym for that is PLOCKR, and it will be known as the PLOCKR portal. And people can go online and get the expense reports from any of their state representatives in almost real time. So that's what Dean should do. Dean needs a better answer right now than I self-reported, mistakes were made. Let's see what happens with the Ethics Commission. Scott, did we lose you?
It just came back on.
Okay, cool.
Thanks. But yeah, we'll cut it together. We'll apologize to her for that. There we had a little technical difficulty. Oh, sorry for the technical difficulty. We're getting John back on here. Restream is becoming the Ollie Marmol of internet platforms. This is 2 weeks in a row we've had these problems. If it didn't save, going to be ultra at Restream. May have to do a thing. Welcome back in, John Combest of johncombest.com. Restream is becoming the Ollie Marmol of social media platforms.
What was I ranting about when we left? Did I have a Plocker idea?
Yeah, you gave the Plocker idea. Now you're going to tell me how we go about. Give me who wins the race. Onder, Holly, Plocker.
If the election were held today, it would be Holly. I can't make a call on who's gonna win it in August.
It's funny to me. I think some of the folks that support Holly wanted Dean to catch a bunch of grief, but they may have given him too much grief. And if he leaves, I'd rather run against Dean Plocker than Bob Onder, I think.
Yeah, certainly. And I think you can't underestimate the machine that Lemke and company have built in terms of getting that message out.
And I like the slate idea. They have somebody in every race. I think that's innovative. It's going to save them a lot of money. I think that's an innovative idea. And
that rolls right into the Secretary of State's race, and Denny Hoskins and the ability that he'll have to use that slate and those resources for his campaign.
You got a Shane Schuler in there,
right? You got a Caleb Browden in there,
and Caleb Browden. We can't forget about Paul Berry running for lieutenant governor.
Yeah, absolutely, a juggernaut.
But it'll be interesting to see Paul take his show statewide. I've not seen him do that yet. If you have a chance to hear Paul Berry give a speech a go, it's captivating. But a Secretary of State's race, Shane's campaign has not exactly kicked in yet. I think Caleb Browden's campaign may be a problem for his campaign. And just in the sense that there was some establishment-ish type money maybe Shane could go grab that he just wasn't able to go grab.
What I think about, and one of the underreported stories, clearly the mainstream media isn't going to report this, but it applies to the Mike Kehoe race. It applies to a Caleb Browden as well. What has happened to Chamber of Commerce Republicans? So when many of us had our coming of age in Missouri politics, if you think about, the early 2000s, the Chamber of Commerce was joined at the hip with our favorite Republican candidates. Mm-hmm. And if the Chamber took a position on anything, that was by default our position. We didn't even have to give any thought to it. Mm-hmm. And I think that the right wing of our party, of the Republican Party, has done quite a good job of demonizing the Missouri Chamber of Commerce folks. And I think the question is whether you're looking at the Chamber or you're looking at Right Path PAC or any of these folks, are any of these elections going to be a referendum among Republican primary voters on Chamber of Commerce Republicans? I think we'd all agree that Mike Kehoe is a Chamber of Commerce Republican. I think we'd say that Caleb Browden is a Chamber Republican.
Can you raise enough money to swamp it, though? I mean, I think that's Caleb Browden's path. Is he raises so much money that if you ask somebody on the sidewalk at Era's Cafe, Era's Pizza, who the Secretary of State is, they'd say Condoleezza Rice.
Right.
And they wouldn't have any idea that even exists, or you could even vote for that. I think his plan is he can define the race because he'll have 3-4 times the money. And I think that's probably a pretty good plan.
Yeah, I think so too. So at what point does this become, and who becomes, does anybody become the one anti-establishment candidate? I mean, my guess is that would be Denny Hoskins, sure. But we'll see how much money Shane's able to raise.
Let's talk about the Treasurer's race. Vivek Malik, great dude.
Yep.
I'm not sure Treasurer is actually a job, but if somebody's going to have it, you want a quality guy. Andrew Caning's a great guy. Cody Smith, I don't know as well, but I mean, seems like the kind of guy you want to be in business with, right?
Yeah.
Three guys who could do the job. Malik is raising money at a different clip from different donors than anybody else can get.
And the ability, and you've talked about this before, so this isn't exactly new ground, but the ability to bring in folks that have never written a check to a Republican candidate before. The great Republican activist Al Rotzkoff, rest in peace, from St. Louis, used to say, you know you're at a great fundraiser when you walk into a room and you see people you've never met before. So if you were to go to a Vivek Malik fundraiser, you're going to see a whole lot of folks, and frankly, with darker skin than we've ever seen at a traditional Republican event.
But that money spends just the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Scott, you and other guests have brought up before the fact that Vivek has a funny name. Vivek, Malik, Malik. How do you pronounce it? And if you're going into the ballot box, do you vote for the person that has a safe name like a Cody or an Andrew versus Vivek?
Yeah, I think you probably do, unless you have enough money to communicate a message. Or Vivek may be the only candidate in this down ballot situation, besides the AG race, that can spend money to demonize his opponents and attack them and define them. I think the interesting thing about a statewide race is you generally have enough money to get your name out, but you don't have enough money to attack the other person. In a three-way race, it's like a Mexican standoff. You're all standing around being like, well, you shoot Vivek
right,
and with your money, and then I'm going to promote you with my money, and that's how I'm going to win. Well, what happens most of the time is nobody shoots the other guy. They don't shoot the front runner. They just focus on themselves, and the front runner wins. So then the AG race, interesting race. I tell you, if you laid out their backstories, the incumbent attorney general probably is a country mile ahead. If you laid out their bank accounts, I think Will Sharp's probably a country mile ahead, or I guess a Manhattan mile ahead.
And this is going to be a great example of how much money can overcome. And I think that Will's money is going to be able to overcome the fact that it's hard to make an argument. I know that he's making an argument that he's not some sort of academic elitist. And you can bet that Bailey's campaign is going to be hammering that home.
Do you think? I'm not sure about the campaign. I don't know. I mean, Andrew Bailey's a fundamentally nice person.
Mm-hmm.
This will not be a race for fundamentally nice people. I think the fact that if there's any, by the time this campaign's over, it's the Claire McCaskill. If there's anybody in the state that doesn't know Will Sharp went to Harvard, what a total indictment and failure by Andrew Bailey. We're just complete failure.
Now, and what I think Will's done an incredible job of is you can't turn on any radio station in Missouri and not hear Will talk about how he's an attorney for President Trump. And as this gains more steam and
Will's a genius. I think Will's one of the most intellectually smart people I've ever known.
And you know what? I would have thought that Bailey would have much more of an upper hand. And then when the news came out that Will would indeed be representing President Trump, and you know what? It doesn't matter if it's one case. It doesn't matter if it's 5 cases. To be able to say that you're the attorney for Donald Trump, who's being persecuted by these liberals. I mean, how do you beat that?
What if you lose?
I don't think it hurts you at all. I think you're still associated with Trump.
Oh, you just say, they were the liberal,
Yeah,
that's the interesting. The Republican Party used to be, we don't do losers. Now, when we lose, we're like, we whine and, well, not rule people, but no offense, your people, whine 24/7 about everything. It is almost breathtaking to see how they could never take responsibility for a damn thing.
Yeah, well, it goes back to what you talk about, and you get a lot more clicks if you're complaining about something than you do if you're talking about how something works well.
I've tried to get clicks by complaining about people complaining.
Yeah, it's a beautiful and vicious cycle at the same time. And back to Bailey real quick. I mean, look, here's the thing. Eric Schmidt showed us that the office can be used for good and still get attention. Democrats would say he used it for all the wrong reasons. But you look at Vivek Malik in the same position. How many little towns is Vivek going to go to and talk about Mobucks or talk about unclaimed property? And he's going to do that every week through August.
Mobucks, Wendell Bailey. John Combest of johncombest.com. Now John Combest of the Radio Zone. Thank you for joining us. One of my favorite chats. Hope you'll come back maybe during session and do it. Maybe we can get you to come over for the day.
I would love to. I'd be happy to. And I will stay at the Courtyard by Marriott. It's the only place to stay.
Well, yeah, duh. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
All right, take care.
No show this weekend. Kelton's going to cut these two things together, so hopefully you don't even know what I'm talking about when I say we're going to put the two shows together. And we will see you. We'll come back. Kelton, I think what we should do, since we don't have a show, is next week before pre-filing, let's do a show every day. How about that?
I can make it work.
Sweet. We'll see you Monday for This Week in